today, what we're going to talk about is how to take an inventory of your year thus far. So I think before we can move ahead, we've got to kind of work backwards. I love reverse engineering things. I'm also going to walk you through the 5 questions you need to ask yourself to be able to finish this year off well, how to establish where your time, energy, and effort should be focused, and how to end this year with peace and not panic. Because I think that as we enter into the holiday season and that frenetic energy and that desire to have this fresh start again, I really want us to end this year feeling peaceful. So one of the things that I love to do, and something that I've already been doing in my year, is taking an inventory. So as I've been preparing for maternity leave, it's been really important for me to be super intentional with my time, with my boundaries. A lot of the topics that we've covered on Growth Day throughout the year have really been singing so loudly in my life as I am kind of entering this next stage, this next season. And what I want us to first start with, and I just want to invite you to close your eyes with me. I want us to just start with, how are we feeling? I think that a lot of times when we turn into tactics, when we look for blueprints, when we lean on equations, we kind of forget to check in with ourselves. And I want for you to not just like ask yourself, like, how am I, but like, how am I really? Like, how am I feeling today? What is my energy telling me about where I'm at? How do I feel about this year as a whole? When I think about describing myself, what words come to mind? When I look at the tension I'm holding, I'm carrying it in X, Y, or Z, fill in the blank. And I want us to pay attention to how our energy feels. One of the words that I chose for my year this year was vibrant. I wanted to just feel vibrant. I wanted to be the most vibrant version of myself. And being vibrant requires energy. And a lot of times I think that when we don't check in with ourselves, when we don't breathe into those deeper spaces, when we don't acknowledge where we might be holding grief or fear or pain, we undermine our human experience, but we also lean heavily on things that might not be serving us. So take a deep breath with me. And then let's open our eyes. And I want to encourage you that as we look at how we're going to approach the rest of this year, I want for you to really pay attention to your feelings. I know that we say like feelings aren't facts and things like that. But one of the things I've been learning so much is that feelings are meant to be felt. And I know that sounds so simple. So let me just give you a quick example. My daughter is 2.5, and we bought her this book on feelings, and she is obsessed with it. And it's partially my fault. It is the worst book to read ever. If any of you are parents and you have these really long books and your children become obsessed with them, it becomes like this whole ordeal. But what's so interesting to me is that this book is focusing on all of these different human emotions. And last night we were reading a page together, and it was just talking about how through the series of your day, your emotions change. And a lot of times as adults, we try to bury those emotions or ignore those emotions or hide those emotions, so much so that we just become almost like machines, like so focused on output. And as how we're preparing for the end of the year, I think so much of it is focused on goals and output and crossing things off of our list. But we need to really take into account, how are we moving through our day? How are we feeling through our day? So the first thing that I want for you to really start with is, let's start with an energy inventory. So I don't want us to first pull out our list of goals. I want us to look at our energy. When we work through the rest of this year, it's almost like finishing a marathon. I surprisingly have run 2 marathons in my life. And I always picture this point of the year, you're at like mile 20. And I remember the first time I ran a marathon, I had never gone past 20 miles. So when I hit that point of the race, I was like, all right, I'm entering the unknown. I hope I can make it. I don't know if I can, but I'm entering the unknown. And this time of year always gives me those mile 20 feels. And so I want us to check in with our energy store. And I want us to make a list of what gives you energy and what takes away your energy. And this morning, as I was preparing, I spent a lot of time on thinking about this because I feel like in this stage of my life, I'm in energy preservation mode, finishing out one pregnancy, mothering my daughter, holding on to what is left on my work assignment and trying to rest. And so different things that give energy, things like speaking your truth or quality time with your loved ones, or maybe you love reading or you love arts or you love playing or painting. Things like healthy foods or working out, doing things you're passionate about. And I think that we often don't look at ways that we can give ourselves energy. You know, we think of all the basics, drink the water, go to sleep early, do all of those things. But so much of how we move through our days can either give us energy or drain our energy. And so I thought it was so fun to like make a list of like those life-giving things and to start with an inventory of just looking at your calendar for the week. How are you prioritizing those things that give you energy? Are they on your calendar? Are they things that excite you? When you look at what you're about to do for the day, are you excited to do those things? If you're not, it might signal that it's time for a change. And then when I was thinking about, okay, well, what is taking my energy? Things like stress or being overscheduled or saying yes when I should have said no or overcommitting myself or not slowing down enough, not leaving enough white space or bandwidth. And so as we take this inventory, I want for you to really pay attention to your energy. So you can see we're starting with emotions, we're leaning into energy. And I think that when we can start with those two things, we can be really realistic about what it looks like to walk through the rest of the year, right? If we don't have energy, if we aren't coming at it from an emotionally whole space, we can't expect ourselves to conquer the world in the next 60 days and beyond. So one of the things that I do at the end of every year is I look at results. And I think that a lot of us here, a lot of you that have joined this incredible platform are very results oriented, right? We want to know, what is the promise? If I do this one thing, what is the end result? What is this going to look like? And so I want for you to write down these 5 questions and I want for you to sit with them later. Okay. These are things that I want for you to spend time on and to ponder because they're going to not only help you finish this year, but they're going to help you walk into the next year better. These are literally the questions that I asked myself. So first one, what was the smartest decision you made in the last year? There are so many decisions that we make throughout the year. And I think that first, if we start with acknowledging one, that I bet on myself with this decision and it was a good one, it builds up that confidence and that motivation of like, I did follow through. The second thing that I always ask myself is, what is the greatest lesson that I learned? The third question is, what is your biggest piece of unfinished business? Okay. What is that thing that is lingering, that is maybe even haunting you, that is telling you, gosh, I can't believe you didn't do this thing. I can't believe you didn't get there. What is that unfinished piece of business? The fourth question is, what are you most happy about completing this last year? And then the last one is just, what was your greatest accomplishment? If you had to do a report card or a conference and report back, what would you look back on and be like, 2021 was a success because I. So as we work through those questions together, and those are really big questions, but chances are I want for you to follow your gut when you start to hear those answers. One thing that I think about often is how a lot of times we have our gut game, our game that's literally telling us yes or no, or this is right or this is not right. And we ignore it. We lean to like the experts or the gurus or the people to tell us what is the next step. But when you look at those questions, listen to that first response, listen to that first instinct and unpack that, because I think that we have this inner knowing that we've been quieting for way too long that we need to start trusting again as we work through. I am so excited to kick off today, and hopefully today's topic just spurs something exciting in you. Seeing the topic of wellness, at first I kind of freaked out because over the last few months, I've literally felt like I was in survival mode. If any of you have been fortunate enough to be through a first trimester, you are exhausted and tired and nauseous and all of the things. And so when I looked at this topic, I wanted to stay in total alignment with who I am and where my gifts are. And I wanted to kind of pivot it slightly. And so today, what we're going to be talking about is boundaries, because boundaries are something that I am obsessed with. And the more research that I do surrounding setting boundaries when it comes to relationships and work and personal boundaries, the more that I see that it really plays a role in our health, in our relationships, in our work, in our well-being. So I wanted to kick this off with a very quick story because maybe you are finding yourself in a similar situation. So the other day I was hanging out with my daughter, Coco, and I got a text message from one of my friends, and she's an amazing, amazing person. She's the CEO of a company. She messaged me and she said, "Hey, I'm launching this book. Well, could you do this interview with me? It would mean so much to me. I want you to be a part of this book launch." And I'm juggling a toddler on my hip and I'm like, yes, I will. And I didn't give myself time to actually think, like, do I have the bandwidth for this? Is this going to work with my schedule? Is this going to not just serve her, but also serve me and where I'm at? And over the next few days, she texted a few times to follow up with me. And I kind of felt this like sinking feeling. Have you ever committed to something and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, I don't know if this is the right thing. I don't know if this is the right alignment. Like, I don't know. And so she's texting me and I can feel this hesitation in me. Like I wanted to pretend like I didn't read the text because I didn't know how to respond and I didn't know how to politely back out. And I've uncovered so much over the years that so many of us are innately people pleasers, right? Like there's nothing better than serving others, making them feel valued, bringing them joy. And we're taught that from a young age. And so after a few days, she finally texted me. She said, "You know what? I'm going to let you off the hook on this. You are so busy. You're growing a human. I can sense that you've got a lot on your plate. And I just want to give you the grace to step away from this." And I immediately felt this sense of relief, like, oh, thank you. Thank you. And then I wrote her back and I just said, "Thank you so much. I truly wanted to support you, but you're right. This is just too much for me right now." And if she wouldn't have stepped in, I probably would have continued on that path of dread and feeling like I wasn't going to fully show up. And it made me realize, okay, let's think about these boundaries and how we are setting them in place, not just in our lives, but in our work and the way that we show up. I had a team call the other day. My team is all women, and we were on the call, and I said, "How many of you guys felt a little anxious last week?" And almost every hand went up. And I was like, okay, what's going on with the moon right now? Are we in a different lunar phase? Like, what's happening? Is there something going on? And I think that there is a lot of anxiety building for so many of us as the world starts to open up, something that we're all very excited about. But for so many of us, myself included, I've kind of thrived in more of an isolated environment. I'm introverted. I've learned to like feel safe in my surroundings. I've relinquished a lot of the guilt that I used to hold on to for not being super social. There's a lot of pressures in anxiety happening. And I'm just curious if anyone else is feeling that too, as we start to navigate what is this new normal. And I know we've talked about this a lot with GrowthDay as we're transitioning, like what is it that we're rushing back to? What are we excited about? But how do we also protect our peace as we start to kind of explore what this new world is like and take the lessons, because there has been so many valuable lessons this last year, and carry them forward with us. And I truly believe that boundaries are the way that we're going to be able to do this and do so elegantly. So how many of you love Brene Brown? I am obsessed with her. I think she's absolutely brilliant. And one of my favorite quotes of hers is, "Daring to set boundaries is about having the courage to love ourselves, even when we risk disappointing others. We can't base our own worthiness on others' approval." And this is coming from someone who spent years trying to please everyone. "Only when we believe deep down that we are enough and that we can say enough." And I love that line from Brene because I think it's super powerful when we think about boundaries, because we tend to think about boundaries in the form of disappointing others or that they're going to actually disconnect us. But the truth is that a lack of boundaries is what actually disconnects us from ourselves. How many of you have ever felt just out of alignment? Like your life's compass is pointing in one direction and you're going in the exact opposite. And usually when we feel that way, we can pinpoint it to places where we have been trying to please other people. We've been adding too much to our plate, or we just haven't gotten quiet enough with ourselves to ask ourselves, what direction do I want to go in? So I was talking to my team about this because I think it's really important, one, as a leader, to understand what boundaries can look like, but two, as someone who creates a culture, which is all of you. You create a culture in your workplace, with your peers, with your mentors, with your family, to understand how setting boundaries can look and also how they can be respected. So the first thing that I think about when it comes to setting boundaries is how can we protect our best yeses and start to make no our default. So when I say this, I'm coming from a place of most of us are yes people. We want to say yes to every request, every opportunity, every chance to serve, every thing that we're needed. And we love to feel helpful. We love to make an impact. We love to show up for others. But what happens is that yes becomes our default. And so we start to overextend ourselves. How many of you have looked at your calendar and just felt dread? Like it's too full. There's too many things. I can't believe I said yes to this meeting and then baseball practice and then I got to go here and I got to go there. When we start to protect our best yeses, like really covet them, it starts to help us make no the default. And here's what I want to share with you. I was sitting at a table the other day talking to another mother. And I told her, I said, I've gotten really good at saying no. And she's like, wait, tell me how. How do you say no? And I said, well, you know what? I created this template. And it helps for me to communicate super clearly why I'm saying no without making the other person feel uncomfortable or that they're not worthy. And so she goes, can you send me that template? And I said, yes. So here's what the template says. Thank you so much for reaching out and sharing your idea or your vision or your request with me. I've recognized that at this time of my life, any yes that I say is an equal no to the values that I've set for myself when it comes to time, family, and energy. I want you to know I'm cheering you on and championing you every step of the way. And my no is not in regards to you, how much I care about you, or your brilliant idea. It's more of me making an attempt to walk out my values in this season. And she goes, oh, wait, what? That's what you send people? And I said, yeah, that's what I send almost everyone. And she said, wow, that makes me respect you so much more. It doesn't make me feel less than. It doesn't make me feel like my idea stinks or I'm not worthy enough of your time or your energy. It actually makes me see that people can walk the walk. And so I created templates like this that allow me to communicate that boundary in a way that shares why I'm saying no, but also cheers that person on and encourages them to also set those boundaries. So first, do we have any Milwaukee Bucks fans in the room? I lived in Wisconsin for 12 years. My husband is from Wisconsin, and they just recently won the NBA Finals, and I could care less about basketball. I actually went to bed before the game ended. But the Milwaukee Bucks were led by this man named Giannis. And Giannis has been playing for the Bucks for years. He's never left the team. And this year he led them to victory. And he is known for being one of the most humble leaders of the NBA. And I told Drew, I'm not going to watch the game, but I will watch Giannis's interview because he always says something just so profound and it's so simple. And I watched this interview of his and they were asking him, how do you become such a good leader? And he said something that Drew and I were talking about at dinner last night that really resonated with me. And he said, so many people that have done great things live in the past. They say, I once won this, or I did this, or I achieved this. And he said, that is ego. He said, on the other side of the spectrum, people that live in the future, someday I will, or I'm going to win this game, or I'm going to take down this person. That is pride. And he said, I have learned to live in the moment, to do my best, to show up for the moment. And that is what has made me a good leader. And I thought, man, how incredible. This man is at the top of his career. And he said, if we never win again, I know that we did it and I know we can do it. And that's all I need to know. And he is just such an incredible leader and mentor for this generation of people. But I love that he talks about ego and pride, because when we think about leadership, I think a lot of times ego and pride can get in the way of being a good leader. And I loved his interview. So if you search for it online, you'll find it. And it's just beautiful the way that he speaks. So when we look at leadership this month, one of the things that I think is so timely about this conversation is that 1 in 4 workers right now in the world that we live in are looking for opportunities for a new employer. So maybe you're 1 in 4, maybe you are experiencing the feeling of having 1 in 4 if you are a leader, but once the threat of the pandemic subsided, which it hasn't fully subsided, as we all know, 80% of people are saying that they're doing so in terms of switching careers or making big decisions or making moves because they're worried about their career advancement. And 72% of people say that the pandemic caused them to rethink their skill sets. So when you think about 1 in 4, that's an incredibly high number of people that are really asking themselves these really big questions. Am I in alignment? Is the path that I'm on the right path for me? Am I growing? Am I leading and impacting in the way that I dreamt? Like, is this the right thing for me? And what's so interesting too is that workers who want to quit overwhelmingly say that they're looking for a new job with more flexibility. So this is all according to Prudential Financial's Pulse of American Workers survey. And I just think that it is very, very telling that we are on this colossal shift where people are getting quiet with themselves to ask themselves these hard questions about what's next and what do I want to take with me that I learned from this last year, and how do I want to start moving through life, and what are my skill sets? And when I think about leadership, I was telling Brendan, I always think about the power of one. A lot of times when we picture leaders, we picture people up on stages, people with large platforms, people with huge audiences. But I have always built my business, my belief, and the impact one by one. So if you are leading one person, whether that's in your household, whether that's your child, whether that's an employee, a team member, a coworker, you are a leader. And so when we talk today a little bit about team, I want for you to know that team doesn't necessarily mean your employees. It means who is your support system in your life? Who is your community? It could be, a house cleaner or a nanny. It could be a neighbor or a friend. It's who's got your back, right? Like, who do you have and who has you? So I was not always a lover of leadership. And I often joke with my brother, who now runs his own company that is growing to this day. We never were trained to become bosses, right? We started growing something out of pure passion that then required additional hands on deck. And a lot of times I'll find myself in a boss situation where I'm like, I never, ever thought that I would become a boss. I never went to boss school. I wish there was a boss school because I probably should enroll. But one of the things that I think about a true leader is that it starts with this humbleness, like Giannis teaches us, but this super honest assessment of where you need help and the humbleness and the ability to ask for it. So let's start talking about how we can get honest with ourselves about where we need help. I think that leadership requires this assessment of our gifts and skills and our passions so that we can either hire the right people or build our team with the right people. I used to use this analogy that when I first started my business, I felt like I was white knuckling it. Like, how many of you feel like your grip of control in whatever realm of your world that resonates in is like this. Like your fists are closed, your hands are tight. You feel like you cannot loosen your grip or you're going to let it all go. And I felt like that for so long as an entrepreneur when I didn't have help. I remember my first hire ever, she emailed me 3 times over a series of months offering to help me. And the first 2 times I said, no, I'm good. I don't need help. I've got this. Second time, same thing. The third time, she didn't know this, but she emailed me the hour after I got news from the doctor that there was no heartbeat with my second pregnancy. And for the first time in my life, I said, I need help. I need help. I can't do this. I can't lay in the fetal position and have my business be running. And it took life bringing me to my knees for me to loosen that grip and open my hands. And let me tell you, I fought it to the core because I am a control freak, or I was at the time. I remember she said, here's all these things I can do to help you. And I said, how about you just help me answer emails first? Within a few days of getting that help, I felt like my hands loosened up and actually opened up to possibility again. I felt this freedom, this knowing that, man, like when I release this white knuckle grip of control, and when I open my hands, there are so many more possibilities on the other side of it. So maybe you don't have a team beneath you in your position, or if you have a business, maybe you don't have a team there. But I want for you to replace the word team with support system. I want for you to think about who is in your life that's got you. So first, I think it starts with taking an inventory. Whenever I start to feel stressed or frazzled or overwhelmed, I take an inventory of where I spend my time, my money, and my energy. And I have this thing that I call my gut game, which will tell me when I said yes, when I should have said no. When you look at your calendar and you dread something, when there's something on your to-do list that never gets done and it just gets scooted on and on and on and on because you really don't want to do it. Maybe you've overcommitted in a way, or maybe you said yes and you wish you would have never. And so when we start to take an inventory, it starts to tell us a lot about ourselves, our gifts, our abilities, but it also starts to reveal where it is that we're either falling short, we need support, or we're not able to keep up. When I take my inventory these days, there are a lot of things that I can do, as in I have the knowledge or the ability, but that I shouldn't be doing. True leaders recognize that they have gifts, which we all have, that are special. And when we start filling up our days, our time, our energy, our schedules with things that aren't actually in our wheelhouse, we're wasting this precious time where we could be doing the thing that we shine at, the thing that actually makes an impact on the world. And so when you start to take an inventory, it's going to become very clear the things that you're spending your time on or the things that you're doing that you shouldn't be doing. Now, this doesn't mean that you can go out and hire a team of 10 and bravo, you've got all of these things off your plate, but it does help you to start seeing where your actual gifts lie and where you can give someone the opportunity to let their gifts shine. When I used to look at outsourcing, I looked at it as a way of just getting things off of my plate. But now I see that I am giving someone the opportunity to do the things that they love, to come alive in a way. It's beautiful when you look at it in not a way of like, oh, I hate doing this, so I'm getting someone to do it for me. But they love this. They're going to do it better with more passion. They're going to be more efficient than I could in doing that. So even if you're not ready to outsource or expand your team or your network or hire a support person, it's important to know what your first step or your next step would be when you're ready. And I think that when we can create a vision of where it is that we do need support and start to imagine what that support can look like, it takes that art of manifesting someone and actually puts action and vision behind it. And I think that's so important. Hello, everybody. I am so excited about this month's topic. The way that I want to approach this session is that I want this to almost be like me sharing my personal toolbox for how you can stay calm and focused and productive. And I've been thinking an awful lot about how we as human beings start to recognize or notice or pay more attention to the way that we're showing up, to our efficiency or productivity, but also to how we're feeling. And so we start with this recognition, and then we're going to talk about how to acknowledge it, whether it's a feeling, an emotion, a sensation, maybe a signal. And then lastly, how we act on those things. So those are going to be kind of the three main themes that we're going to walk through together. But first, let's talk about calm striving. So when I was preparing for this session and thinking about this theme, the first question that came to my mind, a question that I want for you to write down for yourself, is what is it that you are striving towards? So nowadays we are so constantly bombarded with this idea of hustle culture, more, do more, make more money, spend more time. And I have really taken a very different approach, both as an entrepreneur, but also as a mother and a wife and a leader. And calm striving is really, I was like, I need to adopt this as like a part of my brand, because I really believe that this is how I show up. This is how I've built what I've built, but also this is just how I live my life. And I love that this is a theme. So the first thing is like when we're talking about striving, I think a lot of times we get frustrated or we feel like we're being complacent because we don't necessarily know what it is that we're striving towards. One of the things that I found time and time again in my own life is that we often set goals, but we don't actually revisit them. We don't check in with ourselves. Is this goal still in alignment with my values? Is this goal still reflective of where I want to go? Is this something worth striving for? Is this something that I actually want, or something that society or a mentor or a family member told me to go after? And so I think that it's super important when we start on this topic that we get really honest with ourselves and kind of check in on our goals that we might have, whether it's, career-based, family-based, relationship-based, health-based. Is this goal still in alignment with my values? So I always like to start there and work backwards. One of my gifts in life, I think it's been a gift of mine for a long time, and I'm not afraid to celebrate it, is I'm really good at reverse engineering something. So I start with the end result in mind, and then I take back the layers and say, what do I need to do to achieve this? Or what 3 steps are required for me to get there? How am I measuring my progress along the way? So I want us to begin when we think about calm striving. What is it that we're striving towards? And I want us to get super specific on it. Like go back to like the high school days where we talk about SMART goals, like specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and timely. And I want us to look at those goals that we've set for ourselves. Maybe we set them on January 1st. Maybe it was a random Friday and we said we're going to start Monday, but making sure that those are in alignment with our values. I want to share a quick story because it kind of might help you to understand what this reverse engineering looks like. So I used to be a wedding photographer. That was my first stint as an entrepreneur. And I remember one day, I was scrolling on Instagram where all great stories happen, right? And I saw this girl, this other photographer I'd followed, post this beautiful picture of a couple in front of the Eiffel Tower. And immediately I got envious. And I thought, oh, man, I would do anything to shoot a wedding in Paris. Oh my gosh, she's so lucky. I'm never going to make it. And then I asked myself, what were all of the things that she had to do to shoot that wedding in France? And I recognized she had to probably apply for a work visa. She had to fly across the world. She had to change time zones. She had to haul all of her camera gear on her back in the airport. She had to show up when she was probably jet-lagged and exhausted. She had to navigate a different city with a different language. She had to do all of these things to get that end result. And I think a lot of times nowadays we see the end results. Social media is this highlight reel. It's this peer-reviewed journal that we put out into the world saying, look at me at my best. Look at how great my career is, or my family is, or my house is. But a lot of times as consumers, we don't actually stop long enough to reverse engineer, well, what would it take to do and end at that result? And am I even willing to do those things? And it was so funny because when I started realizing all of the things that went into just shooting a wedding in France, I was like, you know what? That bingo hall wedding in Wisconsin last weekend let me sleep in my own bed. I got to hang out on Sunday with my family. I didn't have to go to the airport or haul a bag across through all of the lines. And I recognized, wait, I don't need to strive towards that. That's not the goal that I want. Sure, that end result is beautiful, but that's not in alignment with my values. That's not something I actually really want to do. And so I want for you to think about those things, because a lot of times when I think about the word striving, we're often striving towards these things that we've been told to want versus what we actually want. And so when we get really clear on what is it that we are working towards and what are the steps necessary, and am I willing and able to take those steps, it makes the journey so much more fun. And I think we need more fun in our lives. So one of the things I've been thinking about a lot is the long game. When we talk about goals, when we think about personal development, when we think about growth, we get really focused on immediate wins. We are humans that have things like Instacart or Grubhub. We can literally get a latte delivered to our house within 5 minutes. We're instantaneous people who love to stream things live. We get mad if it takes more than a minute to load a page. But I've been thinking a lot about the long game. And really, when you think about it, the long game is life. And so when we think about things like career, family, legacy, we get so caught up in these short-term goals or gains that we often abandon all of the things that are truly most important to us. How many of you found yourself, as the world shifted as we knew it, kind of asking yourself these questions like, am I happy? Am I exhausted? Like, what does my soul need? Is this worth it? I think a lot of us started asking ourselves these questions, and I hope and pray that you started to recognize, like, the long game is life. Short-term wins are really great for us in terms of building up our confidence, gaining momentum. But when we look at this pursuit, this chase, this endeavor, this striving, I want us to look at it in terms of like living a full life, in not just abandoning our here and now so that maybe someday we can have a brighter future, but in adopting this energy that says, I like what I'm about to do today. I'm proud of it. It's moving me forward, but it's doing so at a pace that gives me the longevity necessary to actually enjoy life. One of the things that I was talking to my team about when I started thinking about relationships is, as we are transitioning kind of into this new world and into this kind of new way of living, I don't know about you, and I'd be curious if you comment or raise your hand, or I know you're watching in many different places, but are you feeling any anxiety about kind of getting back out into the world and kind of exploring relationships back on a face-to-face basis? Because over the past year, a lot of our relationships have gone digital. And I was doing a little bit of research because there was this common thread on my team, which is a team of women. And we were saying that a lot of times we feel like we're lacking a level of closeness in relationships. Like we don't have a lot of close friends. But actually, when we did research, people generally have 3 to 5 close and personal relationships. That's it. And I think that a lot of times in our lives, we kind of tell ourselves these lies of like, I don't have a lot of friends, or people don't love me, or I don't have a lot of close people in my life. But when I saw that 3 to 5 number, I was like, wait, this is what reality is. Relationships take time and energy and work. And based on what stage of life you're in, that can look totally different. And so thinking about, on average, people having 3 to 5 close and personal relationships, I think that gives us permission to go really deep with our relationships and have them be super quality without worrying about quantity. So I was also curious about how the pandemic affected relationships, what people were reporting. And so what was super interesting is about half, so 46% of people that responded to the survey reported that the pandemic didn't really change their relationship. So about half of the people. Now, of the other half, 27% stated that it improved their relationship, and 27% reported that the pandemic made their relationship worse. So it's super interesting to me because half of the people remained status quo when it comes to relationships, whether that's friendships or love relationships. And then of the other half, it was 50-50 in terms of if it helped their relationship or if it hurt their relationship. And so I just think we're coming at a really interesting place when we're talking about relationships because everyone's in a different situation. And that's why I love this month on Growth Day, because there are so many different ways to look at relationships, your relationship with yourself, your relationship with your family, your friends, your relationship with money. But knowing also too, kind of taking an assessment of where you're at after this last year and just being really honest, because we're going to get into something I'm really excited about, which is relationship archetypes. And if you kind of come at it from a place of knowing where you're at in a relationship, it'll help. So one of the last things that they found over the last year, so Wolfgang Krieger, he's a Berlin-based psychologist, notes that during the pandemic, people were reducing social interactions and focusing on fewer, closer relationships. So if we get back to that idea of 3 to 5 relationships, close and personal, I think one of the beautiful things of this past year is that it almost challenged us to kind of let go of some of those relationships on the fringe, maybe that aren't serving or that are draining us, and really focus on deepening the relationships that are really personal and important to us. And so I think it's kind of a cool signifier that we were almost granted that permission through the last year. So speaking of last year, my team and I, we hired an emotional intelligence expert, and it was honestly so fascinating. Her name is Tico Nejan, and she changed my life and she changed my team's life. And in our analysis of emotional intelligence, we had to do these personal assessments. If you've ever done like the Enneagram or the Myers-Briggs, it's very similar to that, where you're kind of rating yourself. And one of the things that Tico called me out on throughout our relationship was that she said, Jenna, I see that you repeat a lot of the same behaviors in your relationships. She said, I sense these like patterns that you have. A lot of times I love to be the person that's the giver. And I'm not saying that as like a toot my own horn, like I love to give, but I love to show up in a relationship where I know I can add value, where I know I can help somebody. And when she called me out on that, she was like, my challenge for you is to like ask for help and not promise anything in return. I'm so bad at that. Like, I hate inconveniencing other people. I hate asking for anything. And she was like, you need to start flexing that muscle, getting better at that. And so Tico started challenging me to like work on relationships that I wasn't always the one giving or always the one making sure that someone was taken care of. And it honestly was a huge challenge for me. But what's so interesting is if you've never looked at relationship patterns, these patterns can be both good and bad. It's very similar to knowing your personality type, because when you can start to figure out what type of person you are or how you most commonly show up in relationships, it allows you to just bring this level of awareness to, is this healthy behavior or unhealthy behavior? And our relationships patterns dictate 3 basic things. So when we nail down what our patterns are, here's the things that they usually dictate. They dictate who we choose. So who are we choosing to be in relationship with? Again, this can be a love relationship, a friendship, whatever that looks like. So the kind of people that we're choosing, the behaviors we exhibit in relationships or how we show up or act, and what we will allow in terms of how someone else treats us. Okay, so who we pick, the behaviors we exhibit, and what we allow in how we are treated. And so this
group, the Science of People, they nailed down 5 main archetypes of relationships. So listen closely. I'm going to walk through the 5 main types. So the first type of person that generally shows up in a relationship is the caregiver. So the caregiver is when you're always trying to take care of or fix someone. You might seek out a relationship with someone who you believe needs to be fixed, even if they don't agree or they don't acknowledge that. So the first type is the caregiver. The second type is the alpha. So you want to be the dominant force, the one who makes the decisions, the person in charge. You kind of create the rules of the relationship. The third type is the parent. And I kind of giggled at this one because you take on a more maternal or paternal role. And it said, like, if you're constantly nagging your spouse to empty the dishwasher or pay the bills on time or put their shoes away. And I was like, oh gosh, is that me? But it's where you're parenting the other person. And so the third one is the parent. The fourth one is the codependent. So you lose your individuality to become this unit. You become kind of one with the other person, and you each kind of give up your individual identities to kind of create a new one together. That's the codependent. And then the last one is the push-pull. So this is the more volatile approach to relationships. It's the type of relationship where you commonly make up and break up. There's a lot of drama. Highs are high, the lows are low. So again, the 5 are caregiver, alpha, parent, codependent, and the push-pull. And I think it's super interesting because you can take on traits of different ones with different relationships, but what they found is that generally we show up as one main type, and that our relationships, who we choose, how we act, and the behaviors that we accept are generally based off of that archetype. And I thought that was so interesting. If you know which one you are, comment so that I can see. I'm just super curious. So when Tico, our emotional intelligence expert, called me out, I recognized I'm generally the caregiver, the person who loves to help and fix and come in and make things better. But I realized that, like, I need to kind of back off of that a little bit and also ask for care to be delivered back without strings attached. That's what a relationship is, right? It's not one-sided. And so awareness around the role is just something that can really heighten how you show up. And it can also kind of give you pause when you're in certain scenarios where you're prone to be the alpha or to parent or to create that push and pull, that drama, so that you can kind of take a step back and really enrich your relationships.
So obviously today is all about focus, flow, and productivity. How many of you feel like you are professional multitaskers? Like, give you a million things and like you can manage it. The busier you are, the better you are. You're the people that can like do 5 things at once, and your spouse or your partner says, "Were you even listening to me?" And you can repeat back exactly what they were saying. And one of the things that when I was thinking about, like, okay, what does the world need? Like, what do we need right now? Is that we are finishing our days, and maybe I'm speaking for myself, but tell me if you're feeling this way too, where you're finishing a day and you've worked so hard and you're exhausted and you're like, wait, what did I actually accomplish? Like, I feel like I got nothing done. I actually feel more overwhelmed after working all day than actually getting things moving forward. And when I think about this last year, especially as we approach the year mark of when the world shifted and everything changed as we knew it, I'm thinking about how so many of us are wearing so many hats. For me, you know, I operate as a family unit. My husband and my daughter are home all the time. I have a dog under the table right now who I'm praying she doesn't bark. And we're constantly being pulled in so many directions and wearing so many different hats. And when I first became a mother, one of the biggest challenges for me was feeling like I was constantly half in on everything, whether that was work or motherhood. You know, I would be checking emails while I was nursing my baby, or, you know, I'd be up in the middle of the night and then I'd start thinking about work when I was holding my child. And I realized that focus is so important, not just for us to get more done, because guess what? We're not efficiency machines. Our worth is not found in our output, but to feel accomplished and to finish our days like resting our heads and saying, well done. You did something today that was awesome and you moved forward and you progressed in your life. Now, one of the things that was super interesting, and a study done by the American Physiological Association Cognition, they performed this on people trying to perform more than one task. And they realized that our mind and our brain are not naturally designed to perform in this way. And it can actually cost us. So when we are trying to multitask, it can actually cost us 40% of our productive time. So when I became a mother and I made the decision that I wanted to nurse my daughter, and that was going to be part of my job for the next year of my life, I realized that I had these very short windows of time to work. And maybe you can relate to that, whether you're in a 9 to 5 or you're working from home or you're building up your side hustle, you get these really small windows of time where you need to move the needle forward. And so if you think about the fact that multitasking can actually take away 40% of our productive time, we've got to figure out ways that we can actually focus so that at the end of the day, we're saying, man, I got so much done today, or I feel really capable, or I'm feeling really confident that I was productive. So we first have to kind of break down some of the lies. One of the things that I always say, and it's not my own quote, it's someone else's, but it's busy is not a badge of honor. For so long, when you run into someone at the store, or if you're sitting down with a friend and you're like, how are you? And you're like, oh, I'm so busy. We started to like wear that and confuse that as something to be honored, that being busy meant that we must be successful, or that we must be doing big things, or that we must have found this secret. But being busy and being productive are two entirely different things. And I really want to make sure that we establish that difference, because one, it's going to change how we show up in our own lives, but it's also going to change how we destigmatize the whole act of hustle culture and busyness. I am very focused on lifestyle in the sense of wanting to be a present mother. I want to be a great CEO. I want to be a change maker and an impact leader. But when I'm working, I want to be productive. I don't want to be busy. I was recently just talking to my cousin, who's a single mother of 3, who had to work from home and also homeschool her children all at the same time. And I was like, I don't know how you got it done. And she's like, it's crazy how productive you can be when you know you only have a limited amount of time. And the thing that we tend to forget is that our time is a non-renewable resource. It's something that we can't go out, we can't earn more of, we can't get it back. And so I walk through life looking at time as my currency. And so when I think about time being my currency, it's super important that the ways that I'm spending it are indicative of the life that I want and the work that I'm doing. So the first thing is called a brain dump. Okay. I know it doesn't have a fancy word, but this literally has changed my life in so many ways. So have you ever felt that you have so many ideas swirling in your head, you're so overwhelmed that you don't even know how to take any action? It's almost like we're paralyzed in inaction because there's so many things we're trying to remember, so many things we know we need to do. So whenever I start to feel overwhelmed, which I'm going to be honest, even this week I was feeling this way, what I did is I opened up a blank document or took out a blank piece of paper and I wrote down every thought that was in my head. Like I almost imagine, like close my eyes and imagine the thoughts just pouring out of my head through my pen or through my keyboard. And they can be the most random thoughts. So it could be like, I need to book a pediatrician appointment for my child. I need to make sure this email gets responded to. I need to make this in my funnel, and I need to work out, like whatever it is, it's like these things that are like living in our head that are almost like bogging us down. And so brain dumps are not meant to be pretty. They're not necessarily practical, but they're this way to release these thoughts from your brain and trust that they are safe. So if I ever wake up in the middle of the night and there's something on my heart, or there's something weighing on me, or there's something I'm even losing sleep over, I take the time to just really quickly write it down. I remember my grandpa always had a pad of paper by his bed, and I never understood it. And he's like, my best ideas come in the middle of the night. But for me, when I can release that thought and say, okay, I know you safely exist here. I don't need to think about you until I'm ready to come back to you. It has been such a game changer for me. I think that a lot of times we worry that we're going to forget something. And so we almost keep these thoughts living in our brain as a means of like, don't forget, don't forget, don't forget. But when we bog our brain down so much with all of these don't forget thoughts or all of these random things that we know we could take care of, not maybe now, but later, we're inhibiting our ability to think creatively, to think positively, to generate new ideas. So one of my team members, Kylie, she said that she does this every Sunday. So if you get the Sunday scaries, if Monday approaching kind of freaks you out and you're like, man, I'm about to start this new week and I have so much on my plate and I don't know if I can get it done. What she does is she drops everything onto a list or a document, or even we have like an organizational tool that we use inside of our company called Monday. It's basically a project management software, but basically she's like, I break down everything that's in my brain and I assign each task to a day of the week. And what she said, it's great reassurance when I see a stack of tasks or projects that give me that overwhelmed, like I have so much to do feeling. And when I see that they actually can fit into my week and that I have plenty of time to accomplish them. So one of the biggest things to remember is this doesn't have to be pretty. It doesn't have to be a bulleted list. It can literally be just releasing these thoughts from your mind to free up your energy and your time and your brain space to think about other things. And so brain dump is one of the best things you can do. And if you work with a team or if you have a spouse or a partner, sharing that brain dump can sometimes help people say, wait, I can help with that. Or, oh, you're worried about that? Let me take care of that. And so it's also a gentle way to learn how to start asking for help or to let people in when you are overwhelmed. I will share this with my husband sometimes because he is like the homemaker. He does the cooking and the cleaning. He watches our child. He's amazing. And so sometimes it's like the littlest things are driving me crazy, like sending the check out to this person or things. And he's like, I can do that for you. And so it's a great way to also learn how to ask for help, which a lot of times we're really bad at. So one thing that I have been thinking about so much is that we all have this overarching narrative that we run through our mind constantly. And a lot of times we're really passive when it comes to it. Like we don't even realize that this narrative is running and it's telling us who we are, what we're capable of, what our purpose is. And within this big narrative, this big story that we tell ourselves about our lives, there are an infinite number of sub narratives, these tiny little stories, these tiny lines, these tiny lies that can either empower us or they can cause us to self-sabotage. I feel like when we really get honest with ourselves and we think about the thoughts that go through our brains like a radio dial, a lot of us have this inner mean girl or this inner critic that can sometimes be incredibly loud, that can constantly be telling us that we're not enough or that we're not capable or that we're not skilled enough or valuable enough or pretty enough or skinny enough or whatever that is. But what I'm inviting you to do today is like a dial on the radio to turn that inner critic down so that we can start to observe what our true mindset is, where it is rooted, and then how we can transform that as we start to move forward. So I want to tell you one quick story before we dive in. So my daughter is 2 years old. Her name is Coco, and she is just this little ball of energy. She's amazing. And every single morning when I wake her up, we always have like a little chit chat. And my daughter is slightly obsessive when it comes to cleanliness. She takes after my husband. He loves to vacuum. And one morning I saw her lick her finger and try to wipe a little mole off of her arm. She has this tiny little freckle and oh my God, I just love that freckle so much. And so I'm waking her up out of bed and I watch her lick her finger and she's just trying to get this mole gone. And it broke my heart because I was like, something in her thinks that that makes her broken or messy or that there's something wrong with that. And so that day I told her, I said, honey, look at this. This is your special spot. Only you have this spot. It makes you one of a kind. It's my favorite part about you. It's so amazing. And the next morning I went in to wake her up in her crib and she wakes up and she grabs her arm and she kisses it. She kisses that spot. And every single day when I wake her up now, she greets her special spot with so much love and adoration. And she notices little tiny freckles on me and on my husband, and she kisses them because we changed the way that she thought. We changed that thought pattern. And it was super interesting because I interviewed this incredible expert in neuroplasticity. And that word is so long, it almost threw me off. And she said that story about your daughter proves that our brains are malleable, like that we can learn and relearn thoughts and patterns, that we can actually change based on our environment and our perspective. And while it's so easy for us to imagine a toddler changing the way she thinks about this special spot, imagine what it could look like for us as adults if we understood and accepted that our brain is malleable, that it can change according to our environment or our perspective. And the good news is that as adults, we have more control over our environment, don't we? So environmentally, we're receiving input or feedback from 5 to 10 people daily, which leads us to cultivating similar mindsets and belief patterns. And what we need to know about belief patterns is that both positive and negative ones can become our perspective. So I hope that illustration kind of helps set us off as we start to kind of dig in to reframing the narrative. I got so many takeaways from all of the other speakers, and I learned so much, but I want to dig a little bit deeper into the stories that we tell ourselves. Because I think that a lot of times for me personally, and this is why I think I admire you so deeply, is that I avoided mindset work for so long. I avoided it until there was no more avoiding it possible. Because for me, I knew that I could adopt all the systems and strategies and principles and become this entrepreneur. But you hit a point in life where if you don't start unpacking the stories you're telling yourself, if you don't start getting really honest about the lies you're telling yourself or where your beliefs are really grounded in, you are going to max out and hit a limit that may be real or maybe just make believe. And I avoided mindset work for so long because I recognized that it would require for me to really trace back my beliefs and maybe unpack some of the harder times in life or the tragedies we've faced. And I know that all of us as a collective human race have all been through something challenging or hard. And so I just want to commend you. I think you are like 10 steps ahead of where I was until I was forced to really say, wait, the strategies and blueprints can get me so far, but until I fix my mind and my thoughts, I'm actually not going to move forward. So has anyone ever joined the app Headspace? It's a meditation app. I am terrible at meditating. I'm so inspired by the leaders who are like, I meditate for an hour a day. I'm so inspired by that. It's not for me. So the app Headspace is kind of like meditating for dummies, and I need it. It's like meditating for busy minds. And one of the first things that they guide you through that has really helped me when it comes to mindset is they have you close your eyes and they tell you, what I want for you to do is to not shut off your brain, but to imagine your thoughts driving by on a road as cars. So each thought you has a separate vehicle and they're just going to be driving down the road. And your job is not to judge them or redirect them. Your job is just to observe your thoughts. How many of you have thought like meditation is like not thinking? It's like shutting your brain off, right? And you're like, I can't do that. My brain is like constantly going. But meditation is actually observing. You become this active observer of your thoughts. And what was really important to me about learning that tiny little takeaway was that I can become a non-judgmental observer of my thoughts. And then I can start to connect the dots to figure out, are these thoughts rooted in feelings? Are they rooted in emotions? Or are they rooted in truth? And I think that when we start to unpack those things, we can start to trace through the narratives, those things that we have on loop that can really hold us back or that can propel us forward. And so what I want to invite you to start becoming is just an observer of your own thoughts, of your own inner critic, of your own inner cheerleader, and of this voice, because when we can observe without judgment, we can start to kind of break things down in a way that allows us to rebuild in a way that doesn't invoke shame or guilt. One thing I want us to think about, the main areas where we have inner dialogues are about our work life, our financial life, our relationships, our health, and our abilities. And so when you think of those categories, I would challenge you to think about or write down the top area that you're struggling with the most. And so let's say you really struggle in work and you might be doubting your abilities to be able to effectively communicate. So you question yourself all the time. You question, did I say the right thing? Did I not say enough? Should I have raised my hand? Should I have spoken up? And that makes you really wonder, like, am I ever going to be a good leader? Can anyone relate to this? I feel like sometimes communication can be that thing where we're like, someone once told me I'm a terrible communicator and thus I must be. So whatever that story is that you're telling yourself in that area of life where you're like, I want to improve or grow here, or I want to change that narrative, I want for you to think about, how can you get all of the thoughts out? This does not need to be a journal entry that you'll come back with fondness. This could be something you could burn, but write down all of those dialogues that you tell yourself that you believe to be true. So what is that story that you tell yourself about why you believe you are lacking, or you're not effective, or you're not successful in this area of life? And if we invite ourselves to gently observe our thoughts and we continually ask ourselves a question, why, you'll likely start to uncover a narrative that has been on repeat in your life.
This can be your day for personal growth. This can be that day you committed to and you remember and you go, that was the day I got myself a community. I got better coaches. I committed to making my life the absolute best that I could. This is that day. Make today your growth day. Click the button on this page and sign up right now.